Hi, Professor Dede here, Professor of Political Science at the Community Colleges of Baltimore County. Today, this video series is going to talk about American foreign policy from the time of George Washington to just about before the Cold War. U.S. foreign policy, the actors are Congress, the President. They need to work together, but the President usually takes the major role in U.S. foreign policy because they are seen the leader in that role. As I've mentioned before, at the writing of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, the presidency was given a lot of power because of the role of Washington in the room. The fact that people thought he would be the first president, and in many ways, foreign policy and the role of the president has changed a lot over time. Our founding fathers never imagined presidents traveling overseas. Today, it's expected to be part of the job. When it comes to foreign policy, the decision-making sometimes can be very slow. And when it comes to foreign policy, the tools include ambassadors, things like the CIA, diplomacy, declaring war. All those things are about foreign policy. One thing I want to mention about foreign policy, for most of our country's history, our foreign policy really centered on the concept of isolationism. In other words, mind your own business. We won't bother you, you don't bother us. We were a country that was looking to isolate itself from the rest of the world. Part of the reason why, we were not a strong country, so we could not just throw our weight around and send troops everywhere. If you want to think about the United States in the late 1700s, we were kind of like a third world country in many ways. We were not an economic giant, we were not a military giant. In 1797, Washington's farewell address advised all future presidents and Americans to stay out of the problems of other foreign nations. Jefferson once said, Americans want basically a nation where steering clear of permanent alliances. Peace with everybody, entangling alliances with none, is what Jefferson said. And our foreign policy really dictated that for many, many years. The first major change in American foreign policy was President Adams with the passage of the Logan Act in 1799, which basically said that American citizens really could not negotiate with foreign nations. And this was to prevent basically the president having their power weakened by a wealthy individual making an agreement with a foreign country. One of the first major changes in isolationism, just a slight change, was in 1823 with the Monroe Doctrine, initiated by President James Monroe. It declared to the whole world our isolationism, but also our national interests. What we were saying to the rest of the world is, we don't care what goes on in Africa, Asia, or Europe. But in North and South America, we consider that our sphere of influence. We'll stay out of your affairs, you stay out of our affairs. The goal of the United States, in many ways, people said in the 1800s, was the concept of manifest destiny, expanding westward, growing the country. And one of the keys to American foreign policy in the 1800s, in many ways, was the Industrial Revolution. We grew our country economically. That allowed us to be an economic giant by the 1900s. We avoided a lot of foreign affairs and foreign conflicts. Yes, we did fight the War of 1812. We fought the Mexican-American War. We fought the Spanish-American War. We fought the Civil War. But we didn't engage in long, tangling overseas conflicts. And that was the key to our success. President Teddy Roosevelt further changed isolationism in a slight way when he became president. Roosevelt used the Monroe Doctrine, and in many ways, to intervene in Central America when it came to building the Panama Canal. In 1903, Roosevelt supported the independence of Panama from Colombia, and the country of Panama was created, its constitution written with a little help from the United States. The U.S. signed a protection agreement with Panama and paid $10 million for the rights to build and secure the canal. The canal was part of a foreign and economic policy for the United States. For economic policy, by building the canal, it would shorten supply routes from one part of the world to the other part of the world, saving millions of dollars and hundreds of barrels, thousands of barrels of oil, being able to get products from London to San Francisco. Before you had to travel around South America, now you could just cut through Panama and get there very quickly. It saved a great deal of time. And this also showed the United States was willing to throw its weight around a little bit in that part of the world by basically helping the country of Panama. And when I say about a protection agreement, that also means U.S. troops too, kind of to stay around. In 1914, the Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo, Yugoslavia. And the United States at first, neutral. Even after the sinking of the Lusitania, we were looking to stay out of the war. It was considered very important. Eric Larson wrote a book a few years ago about the sinking of the Lusitania, which is a fascinating book that discusses some of the foreign policy issues. What led to World War I was all the mutual defense alliances. When the Archduke Ferdinand of Austria was assassinated in Serbia, what happened was Archduke Ferdinand's country, Austria-Hungary, declares war against Serbia. Russia declares war against Austria-Hungary. Germany declares war against Russia. France declares war against Germany. And when Germany invaded Belgium, a neutral country, Britain declared war against Germany. All these mutual alliances like dominoes. One nation gets attacked, everyone decides they're going to join in. It led to the expansion of this war. When World War I started, President Woodrow Wilson called on Americans to be neutral in thought as in action. His campaign slogan was, "He kept us out of war." In 1917, the United States got involved in the war. The Zimmermann telegram was sent by the Foreign Secretary of Germany, Zimmermann, to the ambassador in Mexico. And the purpose was for the Mexican government to attack the United States. And this would lead America to fight Mexico. Germany would continue their submarine warfare. And the Germans felt the Americans wouldn't pay attention to Europe because they would pay attention to their own issues. But the British, historically, a great spy unit, found out about this, notified the Americans. Woodrow Wilson was an academic, graduate of Johns Hopkins. He was an idealist. From the day the Americans got involved in the war, and we declared war by Congress, Wilson was thinking about peace. He outlined 14 points for a lasting peace. His idealism gave Wilson a lot of authority and a position of moral leadership among the Allies. He called for the abolishment of secret treaties. He called for self-determination, free trade, freedom of the seas, disarmament to the lowest level possible with domestic safety. Also an association to help enforce peace, the League of Nations. The 14 points were the basis of Germany's surrender. But the problem was when Germany surrendered, the British and French wanted vengeance. Wilson wanted to treat the Germans like the prodigal son story. You've sinned, but we welcome you back. The problem was, as I said, the Europeans wanted vengeance. President Harding, when running for president, called for a return to normalcy. In other words, go back to the way things used to be. We never joined the League of Nations. And in many ways, the causes of World War II was the peace agreement of World War I. The rise of Hitler in the United States was often ignored, not because Americans were ignorant, but it was the Great Depression. Americans were more concerned about that issue, recovering the economy, than what was going on overseas. Also in America during this time period, there was still a great deal of anti-Semitism. In 1936, the Berlin Olympics were held. And during those Olympic Games, the Germans portrayed themselves as loving and peace-loving. And the purpose of this was a propaganda festival that convinced the world the Germans aren't that bad. So when they started coming home and Americans said, what was things like in Germany? People said it was great. Everyone was nice. They took down all the anti-Semitic signs, though, so people didn't realize all that stuff. 1938 was a pivotal year. The appeasement of Hitler. Hitler had gone into Austria and taken that, and now he was looking to take the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. The United States wasn't involved in this, but Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain wanted peace at all costs. And Chamberlain's plan, in a nutshell, was give Hitler what he wanted. The theory of appeasement: give dictators what they want, and sooner or later they'll calm down. And basically, you make them happy, you remove their grievances. 6 months later, the Germans took the rest of Czechoslovakia. And in 1939, after Germany invaded Poland, the British declared war because they had an alliance with Poland. against Germany, and World War II starts. One of the biggest events during this time period was the incident regarding the St. Louis. The St. Louis was a ship. Hitler put about 1,000 Jews on this ship, and the ship was going from Hamburg to Cuba. The ship arrives in Cuba. The Cuban government will not accept them. If they had gone back to Germany, they would have gone from the harbor at Hamburg to concentration camps. Hitler could use it as an excuse, saying, "Why are you complaining that I'm killing people when I offered you 1,000 Jews and no one wanted to take them?" President Roosevelt wanted to take these Jews. The problem was the American public opposed it by a great margin because the attitude, and this sounds terrible, they're smart. They'll take all of our jobs. And that's why we did not accept them as refugees. It wasn't until really after World War II till we really found out a lot about what had gone on in Europe regarding the Holocaust in Germany. To help Britain before World War II, when the United States entered in 1941, we came up with a policy of Lend-Lease. Lend-Lease permitted President Roosevelt to sell, transfer title, or exchange or lease war materials to the British. The idea is, we're loaning you these things, and you can pay us back later on. One of the big things that prevented the United States from acting sooner was the America First groups. Charles Lindbergh, an aviator, a hero, led a group called America First. They believed basically the United States should not get involved in any affairs of Europe, that let Germany do what it does. Of course, the Nazis were secretly funding many America First groups. The idea behind this group was the United States shouldn't interfere in anything. We should build up our own defense. In many ways, it was also a defeatist attitude, the attitude of Britain won't win anyways. But finally, on September 7th, 1941, with the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States gets involved in World War II. We end our era of isolationism and now enter an era of being involved in international affairs. President Roosevelt, just like Woodrow Wilson, was thinking during the entire war of post-war peace. That was his goal. Make peace after the war. Rebuild the economies of countries. Do those things. During the war, the United States developed an atomic bomb. We used funding from various departments of the U.S. government, kept a lot of the funding secret so we could develop the bomb to win the war. Roosevelt died on April 12, 1945. President Truman takes over, and Truman made the decision to drop the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The estimates were that maybe 2 million Americans might be killed if we invaded Japan. Truman did this decision from a military perspective to show the Russians he was strong, but also from a practical perspective to further end the war quicker and to make sure more American lives were not lost. On the next video about foreign policy, I'm going to talk about the Cold War and some of the events after that. Take care. Have a great day.